Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and I guess we should have predicted it. Last night we spent a lot of time on this program talking about how Joe Biden is surely facing impeachment sooner rather than later. It was a bad news cycle for about 3 or 4 days there for the Bidens. So, of course, we had a new Trump indictment. Sure enough, just about an hour and a half after we went off the air in the dark of night, Fulton County, Georgia, indictments for Donald Trump and many co-conspirators. Joining us right now is the spokeswoman for the Trump campaign, Liz Harrington. I want to get this right. Are you on the Trump campaign or with Mr. Trump personally?
Campaign.
Great. Thanks for joining us. And we start with you because this isn't a legal issue at this point. It's obviously a political issue.
Exactly right, Larry. And there's nothing legal in this sham. In fact, they released charges and counts before the grand jury had even met and had voted.
You know, we were going to talk about it on the air, and then they said, oh, that was fictitious, that wasn't real, we don't know how that happened, so, we disregarded it. Turns out it was very real.
It was the exact same fake sham charges. I mean, talk about a banana republic. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime.
Yeah.
And it's very despicable, but of course it's all political. I mean, think of it, Larry. You have had, over the past couple of months, extremely credible evidence whistleblowers that have tied the Biden crime family to $10 million worth of bribes with Ukraine, other extortion, bribery with communist China, and the list goes on and on. The fact that Joe Biden was on the phone with these business partners, and real crimes that the American people understand.
Yeah.
And then what do they try to pin on President Trump? They literally try to say it's a crime for sending a tweet to say you should watch this hearing on television that is exposing how corrupt the 2020 election is.
Well, Liz,
the unequal standards of justice is just mind-blowing.
If they had their way, they'd criminalize watching the hearing or even conducting the hearing.
That's next.
Yeah.
You better believe it.
Liz, one thing that I'm confused about, and I'm guessing that Mr. Trump is confused about it as well, is that everything that is cited here in terms of the criminal actions, allegedly, in this indictment occurred between Election Day, November 3rd, 2020, and January 6th, 2021. So here we are nearly 3 years later. There literally is no more evidence. Everything occurred almost 3 years ago. What took them so long? Why now?
Why now? Because we're in the middle of the next election that they want to interfere on. That's what this is about. It's about 2024. President Trump is clearly the front runner, and he's beating all the other Republican candidates by 50, 60 points. He's beating Joe Biden by 7, by 10 points, by 19 points with independents. And that is what this is about. They are so afraid of the American people choosing President Trump once again to return to the White House. So they want to bog him down. They want to try to make him extend unlimited resources on these shams and having to fight this lawfare. They're using it for propaganda to smear him, to try to damage him. And this has been going on, Larry, as you know, for 8 years now, ever since he came down the escalator. And every time he's totally vindicated. That will be true in this case as well. But in the process, they're exposing themselves of how corrupt this system is and just why they want to take him out so much, because they're trying to protect themselves.
So just from a logistical standpoint, I don't know if you have had this conversation yet within the brain trust of the campaign apparatus, but we've got now 4 different jurisdictions with indictments. Right or wrong, those cases are moving forward. And the president certainly has a right to focus on his defense, as every American does. Have you figured out logistically how he's going to be able to do that effectively and at the same time mount a campaign for the presidency?
Well, look, he's such an amazing fighter. There's nothing that's going to stop him. There's nothing that they can throw at him that will derail his campaign or derail the American people. The American people are firmly behind him. This is the greatest political movement we've had in our history. So, look, we have great legal teams that are fighting every different angle of these shams. I mean, the fact that they're brought in the most biased jurisdictions in the country, the fact that they're brought without alleging any real crimes, with very biased judges, trying to ram these show trials essentially through to get like you pointed out, Larry, it took them 2.5 years to bring all these cases. And yet they want a trial in what, 6 weeks?
Right.
6 months?
Right.
I mean,
Thank you.
they've had 2 years.
They've gathered evidence for 2.5, almost 3 years, and let's go to trial by November 1st. Right.
It's incredible. And so, well, you know what, though? We've gathered evidence as well for the past several years. The American people have, patriots working on the ground, just exposing how fraudulent these elections were. And this case in Georgia in particular, they're really opening up a can of worms that I think they're going to regret, because nowhere were our elections more corrupted, more dishonest than in Fulton County, Georgia. So
and that is part of the defense. He has every right to bring data and information and evidence to the table to show, no, I had a reasonable suspicion that this election did not go well. I want to ask you about the Secretary of State of Georgia, because much is centered in this indictment around that phone conversation the president had with the Secretary of State. And really they focus on 1 or 2 lines. But during that call, and jog my memory if I've got this wrong, didn't Mr. Trump specifically say that I just want a fair counting of the ballots? I mean, he kept repeating that over and over again, right? He wasn't asking him to cheat. He in fact said, no, this needs to be done fairly.
He, direct quote, said, we just want to get to the truth. It's simple. He also said that all I want is an honest election.
Honest.
And he was bringing up, there were so many lawyers on that call. It's a perfect phone call. Nobody objected to anything he said. And everything he was presenting in that call was brought to him by certified accountants, very serious people, lawyers that were looking at the numbers and saying, this doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And Brad Raffensperger never provided the proof why anything that President Trump said was wrong. Because it wasn't. He just said, your numbers are wrong. Your numbers are wrong. And he said, okay, well, show us, meet with our team. Give us the truth. Give us the facts. He never did. And since then, Brad Raffensperger has been presented with so much more damning evidence about the counts not matching, about thousands of false Biden votes within the hand recount. And what has he done? They've swept it under the rug. They will not correct the record. Those false results are still to this day on the Secretary of State's website, and there's been no accounting whatsoever. So he's got a lot to answer for in all of this.
Liz Harrington, I've got a minute left, but you said the American people are on his side. The polls certainly show that the American people think that these indictments are politically motivated. That said, you know that this is about a very small margin of voters who live in the suburbs in certain states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Virginia, who I keep hearing from the smart people in this town that they're suffering from Trump fatigue. Even if they think it's political, they just want it to be over with. What's the political answer to that?
I think what they're really suffering from, what people are really tired of, is the gas prices, the endless wars, the lack of a border, the crime. You know what they're really just so frustrated with? The fact that it's been 2 years since Afghanistan and no one's been fired. The fact that they're just running our country into the ground. People recognize when you're doing something right, they come after you. They try to stop you. And that's why they try to stop President Trump the most, because he's effective. And he delivered the most amazing historic first term. And the second term is going to blow it away. We're going to get a booming economy. We're going to have our secure border again. We're going to end these endless wars and stop sending all these billions overseas. We're going to make America great again. And the American people really recognize that's what they care about. And they really care about this corruption as well. And that is a big priority to clean up, and the people get it.
Liz Harrington, spokeswoman for Trump 2024. Thanks for joining us. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Well, you've just heard the political perspective on this latest round of charges against Donald Trump and 18, 19, 20 other people. I'm surprised I didn't find myself on the list of co-conspirators. How about the legal perspective? Let's bring in a former attorney with the Justice Department, now the Senior Legal Fellow for the Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at Heritage Foundation. Boy, that's a long business card. Goes with his name. It's Hans von Spakovsky. Hi, Hans. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, happy to. And by the way, I'm also a lawyer licensed in Georgia, where this latest indictment sham has occurred.
So if the president's team needs you, you can go down there. But then Apparently, if you give him legal advice, you might end up being indicted, because a lot of that
Yes.
is this, right? This basically the president is getting advice from legal experts. He's acting on that legal advice, and now everybody's facing jail time.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because they just haven't just indicted the president, they've indicted his lawyers for doing what they're supposed to do under the Georgia Professional Code of Conduct, which is represent their client. Look, I've read all through this 100-page indictment, and it is frankly outrageous that this indictment was put in. It suffers from the same kind of defects that the federal indictment by Special Counsel Jack Smith has. I mean, in essence, she's charging Fani Willis, the local Democratic DA, is charging a wide-ranging conspiracy to interfere with the results of the 2020 election. There are so many problems with this. The biggest one, Larry, is that she lists like over 100 acts that she claims were unlawful as part of this illegal conspiracy, and they include things like the president giving a speech on November 4th in which he claimed he had actually won the election.
Right.
So making a public speech under the First Amendment is part of an illegal conspiracy. That tells you how crazy this indictment is.
Another act that is supposedly, allegedly part of this conspiracy, criminal action, is that he took to social media and said that he was watching a public hearing that was televised and said that it was amazing. He didn't even tell people to watch it. He just said he's watching it. Hans, you are an election law expert, though, so there is one part of this indictment that, if it weren't clouded out by all of the other nonsense, I think it actually would resonate and I think is worthy of discussion, and I haven't heard much discussion about it. And that's the charges regarding this so-called fake slate of electors and the process that they went through to try to... Can you lay this out for us and explain it to us and the alleged criminality involved here?
Sure. Again, that's part of the supposedly unlawful acts was various individuals from Donald Trump and the campaign and folks in Georgia putting together an alternative slate of electors. But keep in mind, these were contingent electors, and they were putting the slate together in case state legislators who were holding hearings about the election determined that, in fact, the claims made were correct, that it was an invalid election, and therefore they needed to send a different slate of Trump electors to Washington. Again, there's nothing illegal about that. We've had alternative slates of electors in prior elections, including, by the way, in 1960. In 1960, when Hawaii sent a slate of Kennedy electors, they were the ones that actually ended up being counted, despite the fact that the governor of the state had previously certified the Nixon electors. These were there in case the state legislature determined that the election had been wrongly decided. That slate was never sent to Washington, so saying it's somehow a criminal act, again, is just plain wrong under the law.
Hans, can you also help me out with these charges and the way, in many respects, they mirror what Jack Smith has already indicted President Trump from on the federal level? Now, I assume that you've got your federal charges, you got your state charges, those are separate, but it sure feels like double jeopardy. It sure feels like the president is being charged with the same crime at two different times.
Well, constitutionally, unfortunately, double jeopardy doesn't apply. The feds and a state can indict you for the same criminal acts.
Does that often occur at the same time, though?
No, it doesn't, and it doesn't happen very, very often. Trump's lawyers, obviously, I think, are going to go in and say that this case should be stayed or put off until the federal case comes through. But that's what's so weird, too, about this case is, look, Fani Willis is a DA in Fulton County, Georgia. Her jurisdiction doesn't go beyond that. And yet, if you read through the 100-page indictment, she's making claims about all these acts that not only occurred outside of Fulton County and other parts of the state of Georgia, but she has specific claims about things that happened in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and other states. I'm sure the attorney generals of those states would be very surprised to learn that a local DA in Atlanta is claiming jurisdiction over things that happened in their states.
So if you're Trump's attorneys and you saw this process play out, including the just sort of Keystone Cops presentation of this yesterday with the website showing it before the grand jury had even voted on it, and then they pulled it down and claimed it was wrong, and then eventually around midnight they presented it. How do you approach this? What exactly do you do if you're advising President Trump?
Well, I would ask a judge to dismiss the case because it fails to state a real claim under the law. I would, in the alternative, ask for a change of venue because there's no way that in Fulton County he's going to get a fair trial. It's an overwhelmingly Democrat jurisdiction. I also would ask for a stay, at the very least, of the action until the federal court case has played out. And frankly, I would think about filing professional ethics charges against Fani Willis for her misbehavior in this case. Not only what happened last night, but other actions that she's taken that I think violate the professional code of conduct for Georgia lawyers, and particularly prosecutors.
Ruth Marcus today in the Washington Post, no fan of President Trump, I assure you, or probably of our politics. Ruth Marcus raised the concern about the local and federal charges being brought up simultaneously. But also she said this. She said, all things being equal, a federal case is probably the sounder way to go because those prosecutors are not beholden to the electorate. In other words, it won't be blindingly political because you don't have to worry about being reelected. And I'm of two minds on this. I get that, but I think prosecutors should have to answer to the American people. What do you think of that point?
Oh, I think she's wrong about that. One of the biggest problems with federal prosecutors is in many ways they think they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And get away with it because they're not answerable. The career people are not answerable to voters. And that's a real problem. Certainly with Jack Smith, the special counsel who, as you know, the Supreme Court previously overturned 9-0 when he tried the same shenanigans going after the former Republican governor of Virginia.
Yeah.
And they said what he did was wrong.
Yeah, we had him on the program, Bob McDonnell on the program about 10 days ago, and he affirmed that. Real fast, Hans, while we're talking about special counsels in the Justice Department, were you as dumbfounded as most of us when Merrick Garland made his announcement on Friday that Mr. Weiss, of all people, would be the special counsel? I mean, I've had conversations with you about the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, and my hunch is that you think that he actually has his own explaining to do about how this has been handled so far. If anything, he should be subject to some questioning, not the man who's in charge as special counsel.
Oh, no, I agree. Changing Weiss's title doesn't somehow change the, frankly, incompetence and intentional misconduct that has occurred in his investigation, prosecution of Hunter Biden, not only by him, but by the same lawyers in his office. And this in no way means that we're going to get a real investigation and prosecution the way we should have had, frankly, years ago.
Hans von Spakovsky, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise as a former attorney in the Justice Department and now as senior legal fellow over there at Heritage Foundation. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
There is more to come. You want to keep it right here on O'Connor Tonight. This is the Salem News Channel. California, the Golden State, the state where people chase their dreams and, back in the day, follow those dreams into fruition. I used to live in California for decades, not anymore. And I don't think I'm breaking any new ground when I say that California is very much on the decline. For the first time in the last several years, for the first time in its history, they've actually seen a decline in its population, reduced the number of congressional districts. People are voting with their feet. and they're saying no thank you to California and to the liberal Democrat policies that have dominated that state for a couple of decades now. Is it a lost cause, though? Is there a chance that it could be rebuilt? Well, let's talk to the vice chair of Rebuild California, Mike Netter. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here today, Larry. And you're right. It used to be the place where people chased their dreams. Now the politicians are chasing people out of California, aren't they?
Yeah, but you're last man standing there. I imagine you standing there with your arms on your fists on your hips, saying, you know, we're going to hold here. We're going to draw a line in the sand in the beach.
Well, we are, and we talk about this really quite a lot, from starting the recall of Gavin Newsom. The reality is, and we have a lot of Californians that for political, fiscal reasons have to move. But as you hear me say quite often, look, we have one export in California, and if the EPA should find California, it should be polluting the nation with bad politicians. And as you can see, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, well, I have some good news here. Gavin Newsom hasn't been in California as much lately. The bad news for the rest of the country is he's tromping around the country on some kind of, I guess, nationwide tour trying to say, I'm not running for president, but whether you like it or not, he comes back to California.
Yeah. That's a great
so
point.
Many politicians. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you,
so
what's the story here in terms of the Senate seat? Of course, Dianne Feinstein, we wish her well, but boy, it's not looking good for her to finish out her term, which takes us through the end of next year. And I know that there are many Democrats sort of trying to get that nomination. Do you think that Dianne Feinstein will resign and step down based on this latest health scare that she's undergoing? And if so, what does Gavin Newsom do?
Well, Gavin Newsom, now this is by rumor, is bringing Dianne Feinstein soup every day, so he doesn't have to be put in a position of possibly picking something, because of course he promised to pick a black woman no matter what, which would be Barbara Lee. But the reality is that the Senate race in California, in full disclosure, I'm a Republican working with Eric Early, ericearly.com, who actually was leading in the polls over the Democrats a few weeks ago. Of course, you saw the massive news stories about that. The reality is what we have in California is the first open Senate seat where there is not an incumbent in probably a couple decades. Padilla was kind of anointed by Gavin last time. We don't elect politicians in California. Gavin tends to anoint them. And this time we stand a chance of really having balance in this race. The three people running, Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and Adam Schiff, are, let's just say I don't agree with their policies, but two of them, especially Schiff, really reek of corruption. And this is the problem that we have, is that these stories get reported, and why we get all excited about, oh my God, Donald Trump's been indicted again, and look at this shiny object. We don't really look at the politicians like Adam Schiff, who's been in Congress since 2000, who has done some, shall we say, shady stuff.
Yeah. Somebody put out a photo of his home in suburban Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful home, multi-rooms. I believe it might be Bethesda. It's probably, oh, there we go. Yeah, I mean, that's knowing Montgomery County, Maryland, that home on the left where Adam Schiff, the senator or congressman from California, lives is probably about $1.5 million. But his actual home in his district is that shabby little apartment. I don't think he spends much time in that one-bedroom apartment.
Let's go deeper than that a little bit here, okay? So the mortgage on that home is $543,000. My God, Netter, that's an exact number. How do we know that? Well, Gateway, a person who works with Rebuild California, and filed an ethics complaint with Congress, and this is reported by the Gateway Pundit. I'll be retweeting that when this story airs tonight. With the actual documentation attached. And let's walk through this a little bit. Adam Schiff was elected in 2000 in congressional district. In 2003, he bought a home in Bethesda, Maryland with his wife. And he marked that as his principal residence. And in 2008, 2011, and 2013, he refinanced this home. To get a good mortgage rate, Adam knows a deal when he could see it. That's how he made a fortune shall we say, on the Trump industry and marked it as his principal residence. Now, I'm not the brightest brick in the pile, but unless Adam has a twin named Adam Schiff, you cannot reside and vote or run for office in 2 states at once.
Listen, Mike, I mean, Ben Cardin, senator from Maryland, announced his retirement. There's an open seat in Maryland. Maybe Adam Schiff could just run for that one. He's more of a Marylander than a Californian.
You know what? Think how much air pollution that would have saved on the flights.
Right,
Okay?
exactly.
I mean, let's go with that narrative. I like that, Larry. Look, here's the reality of it. Okay, he was cited in 2008 by the Ethics in Congress, the Congressional Ethics Committee, who said, look, where do you live? And he said, I'm sorry, I'll return the taxes to Maryland. Now, let's get serious for 1 second here. Here's the reality. At the least, Adam Schiff has violated the ethics of where he resides. At the most, it's actually criminal. And a quick lesson to everybody listening out there, whether you're young or old, you do not lie on mortgage papers. It is a federal crime.
Yeah.
And you do not commit election fraud. That is a state crime up to a federal crime. Adam Schiff claims he resides in California, but claims he resides in Maryland. One or the other is true. And while we're talking about criminal investigations, this really ought to be dug into. This has been filed with the Ethics Committee in Congress. They don't have to reply, but the reality is someone should really open a criminal investigation into this to see if he's even eligible to run for Senator of California.
Mike, let me ask you a question that a lot of our viewers are yelling back at the television right now, and frankly, a lot of people here in the D.C. area would ask as well. From Gavin Newsom to Kamala Harris to Dianne Feinstein to Adam Schiff to Barbara Lee to Nancy Pelosi to Eric Swalwell, the people of California get exactly who they want, they get exactly who they vote for, and they get the policies that they continue to go back and vote for. So your organization is called Rebuild California. Why should we? You've got the California that Democrats want.
No, here's what's happening in California. The biggest party in California is the party of apathy. And this, by the way, is a nationwide problem. People don't vote. Many people have given up and not voting. And when you go downstream in some of these offices, the recall of Gavin Newsom showed that people care. And what the Secretary of State, we have one-sided government in California. And why should you care about California? I say this all the time, because if not, some of these liberals, these rich liberals, will be your neighbors. And if not, some of these really bad politicians are going to be running your state and your country. We are not. Do you really think that people are voting for the conditions in Los Angeles where homelessness looks like Syria? Do you really think people are voting for the conditions in San Francisco where there are literally bodies lying on the street and businesses moving out? They're not. They just don't know, because the Democrats do one heck of a job suppressing information. That's why it's so important that we keep things like Rebuild California going. The party, the Republican Party in California, shall we say, is not restaurant quality. But the people of California who stand with Rebuild and stand on the right certainly are. We are going to take California back. We're going to get people like Eric Early elected. We're going to do what we have to do, because I'm not the last man standing, but we are getting to be the last battalion.
Well, Mike Natter, you know I agree with you. You know that my heart is in California. My children are in California, and I know that California can be better, because I was there. I was there when Pete Wilson was governor. I was there when George Deukmejian was governor. I was there when California really was the dream that we all hold on to, and it can get back there. So good luck with Rebuild California, and keep us up to date, Mike. Thank you. There's more to come. It's O'Connor Tonight on Salem News Channel. You know we're very concerned about the authoritarian creep on college campuses. Creep meaning they're creeping towards authoritarianism, but also they're a bunch of creeps. They don't allow for another political opinion, and it's chronicled in a brand new book, a pretty harrowing account of what happened to one young conservative in a Tennessee campus. It's called Outcast. Now, the radical left tried to destroy a young conservative, And the author and her son join us now, Gloria and Stevie Giorno. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start with the author, Gloria, besides your mom, so you always get to go first. Tell me about this book and why you were inspired to write about your son's travails.
Well, my son attended Belmont University in 2020 at the height of all the drama with COVID, BLM, Antifa, and whatnot. And my son was student body president. He came out on the 4th of July with a post on his Instagram, which is public, his personal Instagram, and he thanked our forefathers for our freedoms. And the next day, we woke to 300 comments from students. We don't even know who they all are, but we woke to 300 comments, mostly negative, telling my son to go kill himself. He was a racist, and he was a horrible person for thanking our forefathers and for appreciating the freedoms we have in this country.
Wow. All right, Stevie, help me out here. Was there any mention in there about George Floyd or Black Lives Matter or Antifa or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or was there a picture or an image that may have had something to do with any of those issues not related to our founding?
Not at all. The picture was one that my mom took of me in front of the White House a few years ago. It was with me wearing a sweatshirt, and the caption said that I was proud to be an American, and I thank those who had served so that we can have freedom and liberty that our forefathers intended for us in 1776.
Wow.
It's not political at all.
And for that, you got death threats.
And not only that, my fraternity ended up saying if I did not apologize and endorse the Black Lives Matter organization, they were going to remove me, which I ended up leaving when they endorsed it. I had to have security guards from the school with me on campus because so many students said if they saw me that they would attack me. And I think the worst of it all was I would get, being from Tennessee, I love my sweet tea. And so every morning I'd go and get a sweet tea for breakfast. And I was in a restaurant one morning, the day of the 2020 presidential debate, which was actually held at Belmont University.
Right.
And there was a student who went to Belmont, female student, and she said in the official College Democrat group text that she was putting, quote, gross stuff in my drinks. And she had been doing it for some time because I was a terrible racist Republican. And the great thing is in the state of Tennessee, we're allowed to record, it's a single party consent state. So screenshots, emails, text messages, audio recordings. So all of it has been transcribed in the book. And you'll never believe what happened when we turned this student in to the university. You'd assume they'd do something. Well, they
I'm
did
going to
something
guess they protected her.
worse. They accepted her into Belmont Law School.
Wow. So, Gloria, my heart goes out to you to have to watch your child go through all of this. I can't imagine. But also, listen, they're college, they're already adults. That said, they're kids to us, right? So there should be some grown-ups in the room. There's supposed to be a faculty. There's supposed to be, the mature people, the educated people, the professors who are supposed to actually look out for this and protect people like Stevie. Did they? Did they step up?
No, they did not. And Stevie did everything that the handbook asked for. In the handbook, it states that any threats, anything like this, be brought to a certain party. Stevie did that. Actually, when he left his fraternity, he filled out everything in triplicate. So it went to the national, it went to the school, and it went to the local. And nobody followed up with us. No one called us. Absolutely nothing. The only protection they were willing to give my son was, one, do not park your car on campus. And I offered to bring in private security when COVID was 2 weeks, and that 2 weeks turned into, all of, I don't know how many months. But I offered to give private security for Stevie when he was on campus. And that's when they offered to have one of their police officers escort him. And there's a picture of that. If you've looked at the book, there is a picture of that. And it's horrible, but no one reached out to us to protect our son. No one. I mean, my husband and I were shocked. My husband and I were shocked to see the Change.org petition. Our son is labeled a racist.
Yeah. Let's remind everybody the name of this book and the stunning cover art, too, by the way. It's called Outcast, How the Radical Left Tried to Destroy a Young Conservative. And I'm thrilled to see the word tried in that subtitle, because they didn't destroy you, Stevie. But I got to ask you, I mean, I know we conservatives, you know, Ben Shapiro always tells us facts don't care about your feelings, but guess what? Feelings are important. Feelings do matter. I can't imagine what it felt like for you at your age to have to be an outcast and ostracized by your peers and by your sort of the people in your age group. Can you share a little bit of what you were going through? Because it's, I think it's important, the fact that they put you through this emotionally.
It is, and it was some of the most difficult times of my life. But fortunately, you know, my grandparents who escaped communism in Yugoslavia were very disciplined and very tough on me, and made sure that, you know, I'd stand up for what I believe in, even if things get difficult. And my parents have always done the same thing. And fortunately, I had a few great friends at Belmont who, you know, left the fraternity with me, who stood with me, and
that's great,
and helped me get through that. And, you know, fortunately, I graduated, and now recently I've become the Tennessee Young Republican chair. So I'm very grateful for all the hardship I was put through. I think it was God's plan, you know, to shape me, to mold me into who I am today and who I'll continue to be in my future. And so it was very difficult, but I'm very grateful and thankful to say that every time I look in the mirror and I think about it, I have no regrets. You know, the one thing I tell everyone is, the post that I put up that caused the ordeal, I posted it at 8 p.m. on the 4th of July in 2020. The only thing I'd change is I posted at 8 a.m. on the 4th of July, so I could have gotten it out there sooner that I was proud to be from this country. I have no regrets, and I wouldn't change anything with that at all.
All right, let me first, Stevie, let you know that you have to be 25 until you run for Congress, but just mark that date right now if you don't mind. And Gloria, there's a lot of us who are about to send our kids off to college this month and next month. Tell me about what, quickly, in just about a minute here, what can we parents learn from this book to sort of help guard our kids as we send them off to campus?
I think we can all learn that what we need to do is talk to our children, have open lines of communication. We need to make sure that they understand that their family supports them completely. We asked Stevie if he wanted to leave Belmont during this time. He opted not to. But parents need to stand with their children. Keep the lines of communication open. Do not let your children be ashamed of who they are. And make sure that they do attend Republican club meetings, conservative club meetings. They can join on campus. And if they do have a professor who is trying to indoctrinate them, because that's what all these universities are right now, they're indoctrination facilities. Yeah. Just stop. Even if it's taking your child out of it school, if it's complaining, if it's filing complaints constantly, do it. Just keep doing it. Just do not give up. Fight for your children. Just do not let the left take over.
Yeah, you don't stop being your kid's parent when you send them off to college, that's for sure. I would add Young America's Foundation to that as well. Almost every campus has a chapter, and if they don't, then your kid can found a chapter for Young America's Foundation as well. Well, well done, both of you, and hang in there. It gets better as they. Isn't it ironic that we hear all this propaganda about bullying? And it's always about, you know, one kind of bullying, about your race or your gender or what have you. How about this bullying that we just witnessed? It gets better, Stevie. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. Well, let's see. We've covered the indictment of Donald Trump down in Fulton County from a political perspective, from a legal perspective. What are we missing? Oh, yes, the media. How's the media been covering this one? I'll tell you this, they're not talking about Joe Biden much, are they? Or Hunter Biden, or the fact that they're walking right down the path to impeachment. No. Their viewers don't care about that. They want more Trump. So let's take a look over at MSNBC and how they're covering this latest indictment, which again, I remind you, is fully based on denying the results of an election. So based on that, who did they bring in as an expert?
That the system of democracy at its heart is the idea that the people get to decide how we are governed. And if we no longer believe that our will is effectuated through the system, if bad actors tell us falsely that every election is stolen and that the only way an election is trustworthy is if they come out on top of it, then something, it tells you something not just about that person or that moment. It maybe wounds us as a democracy in a way that is hard to repair. Mm-hmm. What do you think about how we get better? after the wounds that have been inflicted on us through this process?
Well, I think, the truth matters. I think having these cases be brought in such professional manners, we'll see how they unfold. Obviously, the trials, if there are trials, are going to be critically important. But the article you mentioned that I published about the weaponization of loneliness really does, in my view, point to the larger cultural concerns, because the lack of trust, the divisiveness, the undermining of faith in ourselves, in each other, respect for our institutions, the rule of law, all of that has been deliberately inculcated within our body politic. There were trends before. I mean, we have seen how people have become more isolated, less community-oriented, less civically minded. Then we see how social media and technology has certainly accelerated a lot of those trends. But the deliberate effort to divide Americans.
I have a few things to say. First of all, did anyone tell Rachel Maddow that that was Hillary Clinton she was interviewing about all of the, harms that have been inflicted upon us by denying the rightful outcome of an election? She knows that was Hillary Clinton, right? And for that matter, did anyone tell Hillary Clinton that this is the Rachel Maddow show? The Rachel Maddow show. Rachel Maddow, who peddled in Russian collusion conspiracy theories for 4 years when Trump was in the White House. Is there any self-awareness going on here? Also, all this about loneliness. Why is Hillary Clinton lonely? She has a doting, loving, caring husband, right? That lucky, lucky woman. And boy, what a lucky man he is, too. Hillary Clinton lecturing all of us about the deterioration of the American people's trust in norms and the rule of law. Hillary Clinton, who denied the outcome of the 2000 election, who denied the outcome of the 2004 election, and who claimed that Barack Obama during the 2008 primaries was actually born in Kenya. Oh yeah, it was her campaign that started that. Look it up. And then, of course, famously not only denied the outcome of the 2016 election, but actually created the Russian collusion hoax by paying for the fake Steele dossier, never admitting that she did until the actual evidence proved that she had. And to this day continues to refer to Donald Trump as an illegitimate president. Any chance she had, she would go on stage selling a book or making tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars delivering a speech, and she would call then President Donald Trump an illegitimate president. She's the person who's now telling us about the dangers of the deterioration of norms. That's just fantastic. Well, that's what you get over at MSNBC. It's important, though, here at Salem News Channel and specifically on O'Connor Tonight to end things on an up note. So let me just remind all of you, once again, that woman that you just saw, Hillary Clinton, she will never be president of the United States. That's it tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.